The following podcast may not be for all listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
The Pascagoula River in Mississippi holds secrets, dark ones, and on one dark October night in 1973, it surrendered one of its strangest and darkest secrets. Two men stood on its banks, Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker Jr. They were ordinary guys with fishing lines in the water, their silhouettes barely visible against the ink-black Mississippi sky. They weren't looking for answers, and they weren't seeking the unknown. But at 9 p.m., as the chorus of insect noises fell to an unnatural hush, the unknown found them. Little did they know that everything they believed about reality would shatter like glass within minutes. This is the story of the Pascagoula UFO encounter. The Pascagoula River snakes through Mississippi like a dark artery, stretching 80 miles of murky waters that blur the line between fresh and salt water. Where the river meets sound, brackish currents whisper tales of what lurks beneath. A place where two worlds collide, and neither entirely claim dominion over the other. On October 11, 1973, two men went fishing on the west bank of the Pascagoula River. 42-year-old Charles Hickson and 19-year-old Calvin Parker settled in, poles in the water, light chatting, and hoping to catch a few fish. But as dusk fell, they began to see lights, blue, pulsing, otherworldly. The Pascagoula River runs black as oil on autumn nights, and on October 11th, 1973, it swallowed the last moments of normalcy Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker would ever know. As twilight bled into darkness, pulses of cobalt light that appeared otherworldly began dancing across the water like fever dreams. Then came the sound, a mechanical whirring that cut through the night air like a blade. Charles would later describe it as the sound of death itself, scraping against walls between our world and whatever lay beyond. What materialized above them defied earthly explanation. A massive shape that hung in the air like a tear in reality itself. The craft, if you could call it that, stretched 30 or maybe 40 feet across the night sky, its hulking mass looming just 8 to 10 feet above their heads. It didn't float so much as it violated gravity, hovering with an unnatural stillness that made the air feel thick and wrong. The light that had seemed merely strange moments before now poured from this monstrosity, casting everything in a sickly glow that turned familiar shadows into writhing specters. What emerged from the craft would haunt both men's nightmares for the rest of their lives. The beings moved robotically, but the three creatures floated above the ground, approaching with inhuman grace. Gray, wrinkled skin, crab-like claws, conical protrusions where ears should be, and their faces were nothing but a slit where a mouth should be, and a carrot-like growth where a nose should be. What happened next turns this from just another UFO sighting into something far more terrifying. The beings paralyzed both men and levitated them into their craft. Charles and Calvin found themselves helpless, suspended in mid-air. Calvin, overcome with terror, passed out. But Charles remained conscious throughout the ordeal. feeling every moment of their clinical emotionless exam. Laying on an exam table, Charles saw a device come down from above. The device moved to each side of his head, and back and front. It made clicking noises and then retreated back into the ceiling. A more feminine being glided into view and was visibly different in appearance than the other beings. She did not have crab-like claws for hands. She had fingers, a detail that made her somehow more terrifying. Charles couldn't look away as she loomed over him. She pinched his cheek. Then, without warning, forced her finger down his throat. He gagged and thrashed as she probed deeper, her fingers scraping against soft tissue, searching for a path through flesh, to emerge through his sinus cavity. His screams came out as wet, muffled gurgles, the pain unlike anything he'd ever known or thought possible. Telepathically, she spoke to Charles. "Don't be afraid. We aren't going to hurt you." Once the examination was complete, both men were delivered back to the riverbank. They immediately called the Jackson County Sheriff's Office. What makes this case different from so many others is what happened after. When Charles and Calvin reported their experience to the local sheriff, they were left alone in an interrogation room with a hidden tape recorder. Law enforcement expected their story to fall apart when they thought no one was listening. Law enforcement had high hopes of catching them in a lie. Instead, they captured something more chilling. Calvin told Charles, "I gotta get home, get to bed, or get some nerve pills or something. I can't stand it. I'm about to go to pieces." Charles responds, "I'll tell you, when we get through this, I'll get you something to settle you, so you can get some damn sleep." You're about to hear the actual recording from the interrogation room. The audio is poor quality. I tried to clean it up a bit, but in the beginning, you'll hear an officer ask them if they'd like some more coffee, and then he excuses himself, leaving the two men to continue being recorded.
Sir? Yes. No smoke coffee? No, sir. Okay. I'm telling you, baby. That's something like that is scary. You slowing down to death, you know? Jesus Christ. You hear about something like that, but you can't believe it. Yeah, you hear something. I know. I know. There is something in the United States that have it there. No, it's... They wouldn't have done about what we see. Not what we see. It's something, and the Air Force and all know it's up there too, see. And this ain't gonna be the only time this gonna happen again. This is like that heart attack, I ain't seen. I know. I've done one damage. I know, it scared me to death too, something. I'm just laying there crying right now, I can't tell you. It's something that you can't get over in a lifetime, see. Jesus Christ. I'm so damn bad about it, nobody believes. That's what I thought. I had been through enough of hell on this earth, and now I have to go through something like that, see. They could have, I guess they could have harmed us, so they could have done anything to us if they didn't hurt me. Maybe why they just picked us. I don't know. I'm telling you, man, I couldn't take it. I know you don't get to bed and get some nerve pills or something, see the doctor or something. I can't stand it. I'm about to go home. I'll take you by when they get to us, we'll go by the prayer. I'll get you something. Set you down so you get some damn sleep. I can sleep now like that. I'm just laying there crazy. Okay, when they brought you out of that damn thing, and when they brought me out, I like to know when the hell, God damn, I like to know when the hell got you straightened out, man. When they brought it, I remember my heart, they just froze out just like that. I couldn't do it, just like I stepped on a damn rose. They didn't do me that way, though. I passed out. I passed out. That's the first time I ever passed out in my life. And you said, you need medical records. I need it. I'm sitting there looking for my mother.
After both men passed lie detector and sobriety tests, law enforcement began to believe their story. Both maintained their story until their dying days. Charles underwent hypnosis, revealing details so consistent and disturbing that the hypnotist himself became convinced. But here's where the story takes an even darker turn. In the years following the incident, other witnesses came forward. A couple driving nearby reported strange blue lights. A man on the other side of the river described seeing an unusual craft. Most disturbing of all were the reports of similar creatures that had been made in the area before and would continue after this incident. What if Charles and Calvin weren't chosen at random? What if something about the Pascagoula River draws these beings back again and again? Calvin spent decades trying to forget that night. He moved away, changed jobs, and avoided the spotlight. But in 2018, a few years before his death, he finally broke his silence. What he revealed in his book suggests that whatever happened that night was even stranger than the original reports. Was it aliens, interdimensional beings, or something even more sinister that our human minds can't comprehend? The waters of the Pascagoula River hold their secrets close, but one thing's certain. On that warm October night in 1973, something reached out from the unknown and touched our world, and we are still feeling the ripples to this day. If you find yourself driving along the moonlit shores of the Pascagoula River, just north of Ingalls Shipyard, pause for a moment, let the engine idle, and listen to the waters whisper. This is where they came that night, emerging from the darkness above. But the river wasn't their only hunting ground. 6 days later, on a lonely stretch of Interstate 10 between Mobile and Pensacola, another encounter occurred. Another victim. Same description of these otherworldly beings with inhuman claws. 30 minutes of lost time. This gentleman was taken into the ship with his truck, and then they returned him back to Pine Forest Road. 2 encounters just days apart, 2 stories that mirror each other in the most chilling way. I guess the question isn't whether they're still out there, it's whether they're watching right now, waiting for their next opportunity to reach down from the darkness. As I head back into the unexplained realms, remember that when you're driving alone at night, those lights in the rearview mirror might not be from this world. Until next time, keep watching the skies and listening closely. That humming sound might be an otherworldly visitor, returning for another dance with humanity.